I married him for love, but now I wish I'd chosen stability instead. The smell of burnt toast snapped me back to reality. I groaned, rushing to the kitchen to pull the smoking bread out of the toaster. My tiny apartment was already filled with a haze of regret, both literal and figurative. The cheap linoleum floor stuck to my bare feet as I fanned the blackened toast with a magazine, praying the fire alarm wouldn't go off again. This wasn't the life I imagined when I said, "I do," to Adrian 4 years ago. Back then, my heart had drowned out the warning bells. Now, those bells were deafening, echoing in every unpaid bill and broken promise. It started when I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree in literature and no clear plan for my life. Adrian burst into my world like a storm, charming, passionate, and utterly unpredictable. I met him at a local poetry slam, where he performed a piece about lost love and found purpose. His words had an edge that thrilled me, and his unruly curls and intense eyes sealed the deal. After the show, I worked up the courage to approach him. "You were incredible up there," I said, clutching my coffee cup like a lifeline. He smirked, his gaze locking onto mine. "Thanks. I could say the same about you." I laughed, nervous and flattered. "I wasn't on stage." "Not yet," he said, leaning in closer. "But I can tell, you've got a story in you." And just like that, I was hooked. Adrian made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. He was a dreamer, an artist who believed in following passion over practicality. And I, caught in the glow of his charisma, believed in him. "What do you mean you quit your job?" I asked one evening, 6 months into our relationship. Adrian shrugged, lounging on my couch as if he didn't have a care in the world. "The coffee shop was stifling my creativity. I need time to focus on my writing." "But how are you going to pay rent?" He grinned, pulling me onto his lap. "I'll figure it out." "You worry too." His confidence was intoxicating, and despite my better judgment, I let it slide. I was working as a teaching assistant at the time, barely scraping by, but I believed in Adrian's talent. He promised that one day his writing would change the world, and I wanted to be there to witness it. We got married a year later in a small courthouse ceremony. Adrian insisted on writing our vows, which were beautiful and filled with promises of a life full of adventure and love. He looked into my eyes and said, "I may not have much to give you, but I will always give you my heart." It was romantic, poetic, and utterly naive. The cracks started to show almost immediately. Adrian's focus on writing turned into late nights drinking with other aspiring artists, while I took on extra hours at work to cover our bills. When I brought up money, he'd wave it off with a breezy, "I'm working on something big, babe. You'll see." One night, after yet another bounced check, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Adrian, we need to talk." He looked up from his notebook, his expression already defensive. "What's wrong now?" "What's wrong is that I'm killing myself to keep us afloat while you sit here scribbling poems that no one's paying for." My voice cracked, a mix of anger and desperation. He slammed the notebook shut. "You knew what you were signing up for. You said you believed in me." "I believed in us," I shot back. "But this isn't a partnership. It's me carrying everything while you chase some dream that's never going to pay off." His face darkened, and for the first time, I saw something cold in his eyes. "If you think I'm such a failure, why did you marry me?" The question hit me like a punch. I didn't have an answer, not one that would make sense to either of us. The years dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Adrian published a few poems in small literary journals, but the big break he always talked about never came. Meanwhile, I climbed the ranks at the school, eventually landing a full-time teaching position. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills. Every promotion I earned felt like a reminder of Adrian's stagnation. I started resenting him, not just for his lack of ambition, but for how easily he seemed to accept my sacrifices. Our love, once a roaring fire, had dwindled to embers. "Do you even love me anymore?" Adrian asked one night as we lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The question startled me. I turned to him, searching his face for the man I fell in love with. Of course I do, I said, though the words felt hollow. Then why does it feel like you're always disappointed in me? I didn't answer. How could I admit that I was disappointed, not just in him, but in myself? I had chosen love over stability, and now I was drowning in the consequences. Things came to a head 6 months ago when Adrian borrowed $2,000 from our joint account to self-publish his poetry collection without telling me. You spent our rent money? I screamed, waving the receipt in his face. It's an investment, he argued, his voice rising to match mine. This could be my big break. We can't live on could Bess, Adrian. We need money for rent, for groceries, for basic survival. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and defiance. I thought you believed in me. I used to, I said quietly, the weight of the words crushing me. But I don't know if I can anymore. Now, as I sit in our cramped apartment, staring at the charred remains of breakfast, I wonder if love was ever enough. Adrian walks in, his hair a mess and his notebook under his arm. He kisses my cheek as if nothing is wrong, as if our marriage isn't hanging by a thread. Morning, babe, he says, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Morning, I reply, my voice devoid of warmth. He doesn't notice. He never does. I married Adrian for love. I thought it would be the foundation of a life filled with joy and adventure. But love doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't fix leaky faucets or soothe the sting of yet another overdraft fee. I still love him, I think. But some days, I can't help wondering what my life would look like if I had chosen stability instead. If I had married someone who shared my sense of responsibility, who valued security as much as passion. As Adrian sits across from me, scribbling away in his notebook, I feel the weight of unspoken words between us. Maybe one day I'll find the courage to say them. Or maybe, like so many of Adrian's dreams, they'll remain unfinished.